Before you went to bed, you found the note from 2 days ago. You read it again, now knowing whose quill had composed it. The calligraphy was perfect, the lines evenly spaced, and the font was ideally sized to utilize the entire sheet of paper. Not a single mistake in grammar or spelling, the page clean from any marks of erasure or mistake. Even where the words had darkened from the fresh dip in the well, there wasn't a drop of misplaced ink. Yet the content itself was still what you'd expect from any Hearts and Hooves Day note. Elegant words and sentences to say something simple. Either Celestia's millennia of letter writing had made her next to perfect at composition, or... You can't help but chuckle as you picture a frustrated Celestia at her desk. Crumpled parchment surrounding her hooves, nightstand candle burnt down to the bottom, while she crumpled another piece of paper and tossed it away due to a mistake or a misuse of a prose. How long did she work on this, you wonder? How many times had she almost changed her mind before sending Stonehoof out to you? Did she watch you read it from her private terrace? Could you even imagine her nervous, or blushing like a schoolgirl? She's always so composed and maybe even slightly aloof. It hurt your head to picture her any other way. Not to mention made you sleepier. You fold the letter and return it to your nightstand. Before you know it, you're asleep. The next day, you go about your routines just like every other day. Though Stonehoof was sporting a nice shiny medal of achievement. He looked so pleased with himself as he stood entry, occasionally adjusting it so it reflected the most sunlight. Celestia must have pinned it on him herself. You knew it was partially a guilty conscience that led to that medal, but you're sure he earned whatever he was told it was for. He seemed to think so, and you saw no reason to tell him otherwise. Besides, like he would believe Princess Celestia felt guilty about using him to deliver a love note. Heck, you could hardly believe it. The rest of the day was spent thinking about this meeting of yours. It would be the third time you and her had shared a quiet evening. But for the first time, you didn't really know the motivation behind it. What would you say? How would you act? Do you talk to her like you would talk to a woman now? Like a triggered explosive, your mind rapidly reminded you of every lame, creepy, and otherwise poor experience you've ever had with the women back home. Except with Celestia in place of all of them. You get a chill at the thought. No, don't complicate this. That's why she was so skittish. How many other clueless ponies or other species must have thrown themselves at her during her thousands of years of... Jesus! She's thousands of years old! And yet she said some things that... And what if you didn't... What if you misread a signal... You wiped the sweat from your brow and gripped the wood of your spear a little tighter. You don't know how you were so sure of yourself last night, but now you're a little frightened. You barely noticed when lunchtime came, and by the time the evening bells came to chime, you were seriously considering running to Twilight and asking her to send you home. Not that she knew how, but even a botched smell might be better than... Wait, what are you honestly afraid of? Get a grip, Anon. You were just sitting down with her on the balcony, talking. It's not the end of the world. Daydreaming again? Stonehoof is there to relieve you, still displaying his shiny medal. You're never going to get one of these if you're asleep at your post, Anon. You nod in agreement, not wanting to argue with him. If only he knew the story behind that. That's for another day. You hurry to the west balcony, stopping only at a restroom to wash your face and fix your uniform on. You took a little longer than you would have liked, but by the time you get there, the sun was well below the horizon. There was a few ponies there this time. Celestia hadn't closed it off to the public like she had last night. Your favorite bench is still free, so you take a seat. The sunset is pretty normal looking compared to the last 2 days, which looked like masterful paintings by comparison. Today it looked manufactured as if no real thought went into it. You look back to the entrance, then back to the sky as it darkened more. No sign of the princess. You relax slightly, using the extra time to collect your thoughts. You get a little more time than you bargained for. You look back at the entrance when the sky is nothing but deep purples. And again, those colors faded to Luna's night. And one more time when her moon began to shine and the stars appeared brighter and brighter. It was not until the bells began to chime again, signaling an hour since your shift had ended, that you realize she's not coming. You sigh quietly and lean back in your seat, looking from the city below to the marble below your feet. A small part of you is relieved, but those feelings are quickly overridden by disappointment and even a little sadness. It could have been one of a million things: changelings, dragons, an angry griffin diplomat, Paris Brights, her sister scared of the vacuum again, The world doesn't stop for the Princess of the Sun. At least, that's what you hope went wrong. Something urgent in this rendezvous just slipped her mind, that's all. Even if she did feel different, she was far too courteous to stand you up. Right? Your only answer is a gust of wind from the west. You rub your arms and suppress a shiver. It feels a lot colder than usual. Sighing again, you decided you've waited long enough and head back inside. Your head hung a little low. Maybe you'll head to the pub and have a few. You push open the doors and shove your hands into your pockets to warm them up. Pony cider is pretty weak, but you'll find a way to... Mr. Anonymous? You look up. A Pegasus guard is standing before you. He has a letter pinned to his helmet. Message for you, sir. He stands at attention, making no effort to give you the letter. You eye him for a moment, then take the letter off his helmet. Princess Celestia instructed me to deliver this to you here, sir. You recognize his voice, even if he looks identical to every other pony guard. Thanks, Stormdancer. How long have you been out here? Close to an hour, sir. Princess Celestia said to wait for you by the west balcony gate and deliver this message to you. I was instructed not to read the message. Yeah, he was one of those kinds of guard ponies. Celestia never told him to go out to the balcony to look for you, just to wait by the door. So he did exactly that. Well, you skulked outside and froze. You had half a mind to go upside his head, but you were too busy reading the note and feeling the color drain from your face. Dearest Anon, I must respectfully request we forego our usual meeting spot for a more formal venue. A meeting with the Griffin Kingdom took the entirety of the day, and we were forced to skip lunch. I believe you also deserve a break from the questionable cuisine of your barracks as well. Dinner will be served in my private dining room at 7 o'clock. This should allow you enough time to change from your uniform to something a little more agreeable for dinner. You don't finish the rest. 7 o'clock. That was right now. Her dining room was about 10 flights of stairs, and entire castle lengths of space between there and here, and... Is everything alright, sir? You look absolutely... You stuff the letter into your pocket and bolt towards the stair. Your legs couldn't move you fast enough. You were already late. How long would she sit there and wait for you? As far as she's concerned, you got the note an hour ago. If this goes wrong for you, Stormdancer is going to wake up with no feathers tomorrow. Your lungs were on fire, and your legs felt like lead. But you made it to the door of her dining room. The guard stood aside, expecting you. You hit the doors, shoving them open. You nearly fell headfirst into the chamber, but you keep your balance long enough to simply burst into the room, only to bend over at the waist, panting, holding your knees, trying very, very hard to explain what happened. Didn't... Note, guard. Ran. Sorry, late. You steady your breath enough to look up. There is a small table with 2 seats, candles, wine, and various plated vegetables, and what smells like fried eggplant. One chair is empty. Celestia is in the other. She's wide-eyed. A fork with a bit of salad floating near her mouth. Speechless. You're still panting too hard for complete sentences. You try again between gasps, but you didn't know that she was waiting for you until right now, and that you didn't mean to be late. And no matter how much you insisted that it wasn't your fault, that you were sorry, and hoped that she wasn't angry with you, she continued to look surprised, but she placed her fork down at least and walked over. When she reaches you, she rubs your back with her hoof to help you breathing. Then she leans forward and says, Anon, you could have told Stormdancer and had him fly ahead of you. He can fly faster than you can run. She begins to chuckle, trying her best not to burst into laughter. You do the same. Before you know it, you and Celestia are laughing pretty hard. It did hurt your chest, but you didn't care. It was hard to say if you two were laughing at how ridiculously you entered the room, or from a collective relief that one hadn't stood the other up. Either way, it felt really nice. When the laughter subsided, she looked guiltily to the food on the table where you finished catching your breath. I must apologize, Anon. I had to know you'd be late. I wouldn't have gone without you. You shook your head, assuring her that it's okay and you understand, offering your own apology. And you're still in your uniform. If you'd like, I could call my chambermaid and have her find a robe that may fit you. I thought you liked me in my uniform. It had to be done. You felt a little bad, but you weren't going to spend who knows how long dancing around the subject. No matter what happens from here on, it was worth catching her off guard, if only to see the slight blush creep onto her surprised face. Oh, well, yes, I do prefer it that way. Cross-Stitch did some magnificent work, especially with the embroidery when you completed your training. Right, of course, that's what you meant. You had to admire how quickly she composed herself again. You began to smooth and tuck in the parts that were disheveled from your little run here.
It fits me perfectly. Best piece of clothing I ever wore.
No lies there. But the princess was definitely interested in more than just the materials as her eyes followed your movements.
He was looking for a challenge. You provided him much more than he bargained for. I'm sure you're hungry. Let's see what you like.
She'd already trotted back to the table. No matter. You can prod her about her note after a little food. She didn't think of an excuse to bail on dinner, so it's a good start if there ever was one. And the smells of sautéed vegetables, fried eggplant, and some kind of tomato sauce were calling you over.
If this isn't to your liking, the chef assured me he could cook anything you asked for. Please, don't feel shy about asking for something else.
You assure her the food looks delicious. She looked pleased and returned to her seat. You took your seat on the other side of the table and began to make yourself a plate. The food tasted as good as it looked, maybe even more so. Food fit for a princess, after all. Along with all the veggies, you found freshly baked rolls, butter, some kind of quiche, and a pie that would put the marketplace to shame. You tried your best not to load up your plate more than she was, but the more you tasted, the more you wanted. Her smile encouraged you to enjoy the meal anyhow. After a few moments of silence, she began to talk to you again.
In retrospect, I should have picked a more creative messenger to deliver that note. Some of the newer guards' ponies can be a little too literal.
You shake your head.
Don't worry about it, Your Met.
Celestia, please, no titles when we're in these doors. You're my guest, not my guardsman.
You turn to be taken slightly by surprise, but you nod and continue.
Okay, Celestia, I've been in their shoes too, and I've seen a lot worse.
She chuckles and encourages you to continue. You tell some stories, leaving out names just in case she finds any of them a little too ridiculous. One incident involving a unicorn who spent an entire day searching for a phoenix down pillow. Another of 2 cadets trying very hard to guard the great clock's pendulum. Incidents involving one of her guests' cats, and finally one with you. Celestia leaned forward for this, likely surprised you'd tell her one where you were the victim. Your sergeant had done a very good job of convincing you that Luna only ate dodo eggs, and brought it up just enough for you to believe it. Being from a foreign world, you assumed they still existed here. Celestia laughed particularly hard when she learned Luna was not only in on it, but took great delight in screaming at you when you couldn't find any, and had the gall to try and serve her chicken eggs instead. Dinner with Celestia continued like this, you mostly talking, her listening and laughing occasionally, followed by a few moments of eating, but it never lasted long. She wanted you to keep talking to her, and when you told a particularly long story or simply carried on, she had the same warm, beautiful smile you'd come to enjoy every evening, as if you were an old friend from her past, and this was a chance to catch up with lost time. But you were running out of things to say and desperately wanted to get back to eating.
So, what happened with the Griffins today? They must have been upset about something.
She chuckled, shaking her head and rubbing her forehead with a hoof. You only realized then that she wasn't wearing her crown.
You know how they can get. Some piece of land 100 years ago belonged to one of their great-grandfathers, and
she sighs, memories of the day's nonsense coming back to her.
None of them cared about it till a few frontier ponies settled there. Then all of a sudden it's a claim and a birthright this and birthright that. They're like a child who sees his younger sibling playing with a forgotten toy.
You nod, finishing off another helping of food.
We reached an agreement an hour before sunset. The entire day was lost over who had the right to pick apples from one particular tree in an orchard of hundreds.
She sighed and used her magic to begin cutting a slice of pie for herself. You've heard rumors about her love in cake and pie. Don't laugh if she proves them, Anon. Not like she'd shovel the thing down. But that was an awfully big slice considering how small the rest of her portions had been.
At least they get to stay in their homes. I'm sure the ponies are happy about that.
She nods as the slice lands in a serving dish and floats it over to her.
Oh, where are my manners? Would you like a piece? It's cherry.
You nod, and her good spirits return as she cuts a piece and serves it to you. You would have found it amazing that the Princess Equestria was serving you a pie, and looked absolutely delighted to do so, but you didn't have the time to think about that because the rumors were true. Now, to be fair, the pie was delicious, like exactly the right amount of sugar and somehow still warm from the oven delicious. And the cherries might as well have fallen from the branch to the crust. But you weren't halfway done with your first slice, and she had stealthily cut and finished a second, somehow managing to remain graceful the entire time. She offered you a second piece, but you declined. This made her slightly disappointed. You having seconds must have been her excuse to have a third piece. You failed your mission, Anon, and now pie will go uneaten. How could someone this regal and mystical be so cute in regard to pastry? You really were stuffed, though. You clean your mouth with a napkin and tell her so, adding that you'd never thought in a million years that you'd enjoy a dinner like this. She smiles brightly and takes a napkin for herself, standing from her seat.
I'd like to go for a walk after a meal like that. Care to join me, Anon?
Of course, Celestia.
She opens the doors to the dining room with her magic. They lead down a hall to a pair of glass double doors, a balcony, her private balcony. You felt a little more special at that moment, and somehow she could tell. And the room seemed warm with her quiet grin. She motions with her head for you to follow. You do her one better and walk right beside her.
Have I been a good date so far?
You smirk when she looks away for a second, hiding another blush you could only assume.
You've been wonderful, Anon. It's been far too long since I've had a dinner that wasn't formal or interrupted or...
She trails off at that last word, but you made it out. Truthfully, even with the company of your colleagues in the barracks, you know what it was like to eat alone night after night.
I could become accustomed to more meals like this. I must confess, I haven't laughed like that in quite some time.
You nod and look forward when her balcony doors open. The cold wind of the night hits you, and even Celestia's radiant warmth wasn't enough of a shield. You wrap your arms around yourself and try not to shiver. But when you see the view, you shiver all right, but not because of the cold. The view is breathtaking. The entire palace of Canterlot below you, lit up by lights and magic, with the city stretched below that. You walk a little further, but notice there is no railing or glass. This was a balcony made for someone who could fly. You took a step back, but still kept your eyes glued to the sky. The moon was a silver sliver in a sea of stars. They somehow were more brilliant here than they ever were even in the countryside.
There are magical wards that keep the lights of the city from disturbing the stars.
She seemed to know what you were thinking. Or it must have been a common question for the lucky few who'd been allowed here.
Do you come here a lot? After a long day?
You turn back to her. She's sitting with her wings slightly open, her mane bellowing softly, her eyes on only you, as if the entirety of the world behind and above you was insignificant to you being there.
I do. Not nearly as much as I'd like. It can be a bit cold and...
Again, she trails off when she gets to a word she doesn't like.
Lonely?
She nods quietly, looking away. You walk back over to her. She looks back at you. Despite the shift in conversation, she still smiles, still keeps a sunny demeanor. You take a seat next to her. The floor is surprisingly warm, despite being exposed to the high altitude and night.
This platform was gifted to me from a gifted unicorn long ago. He said that I should have a place where I can take refuge from the terrors of high society and freeloading nobles.
She chuckled at the memory, one of someone who must have been gone for centuries.
At the time, I was grateful. The world was a very different place. The country was not as peaceful and serene as you have come to know it.
You nod, slipping a little closer to enjoy more of her warmth.
But times changed. The country began to run itself. Ponies naturally desire harmony, so the squabbles lessened. Before long, the world was at peace. Even the dragons found our presence tolerable. More so when they found them more gems than they could ever eat. And like some sort of magic spell was cast, the world became quiet. My life became very quiet.
She closes her eyes, and it was her turn to slip a little closer.
For a time I rested, enjoyed the quiet, welcomed it, told myself that it was my reward for centuries of hard work and painful sacrifices. And for a time I believed that. But lately, I've become more and more aware of how much I had forgotten to live. Twilight Sparkle helped me realize just how much I miss company, but she grew up as young fillies do, and I had to let her go. Then
she turned back to you. Her eyes were moist with what could only be tears, but they remained at bay, held in check by centuries of dignity and etiquette. Through all her soul-searching, she was still the glowing vision of a benevolent ruler in a perfect kingdom. You began to wonder if she even remembered how to cry.
Then you appeared, Anon.
Me?
You had a feeling you tied in here somewhere. But you were sure if anything was going to make her feel like she needed another in her life, it would be Princess Cadence's wedding. Not the day you showed up.
In fact, Anon, refresh my memory. When you arrived in Canterlot, what did you say to me when I asked you to calm down?
Princess, I was scared. You can't possibly...
Please, for old time's sake, it amused me then, and the mood is somber. We could use a little enjoyment. She smiled and nudged you back with one of her wings.
I told you... You clear your throat. That I wasn't going to listen to a... giant talking horse.
She chuckled and gave you another prod with her wing. I believe there were a few more colorful words in that sentence, but yes, Commander Highwind nearly fainted. You fidget and look around nervous. That memory was a bit too fresh considering where you were now. She keeps her wing on your back, giving it a reassuring rub. That does the trick to feel your nerves away. She's so warm and soft, you can't help but cuddle closer to her body. She doesn't protest. If anything, her wing pulls you into her. A sigh escapes her, a much happier one than the last few. How long has she wanted to do this, you wonder? Nobody has spoken to me like that in... I can't even remember. Even Discord at his absolute worst was never that direct. You had no idea who I was, and to you I was just another strange creature. When you finally calmed down, we talked for the entire day and into the night. About your life, my life, about the worlds we lived on. And at first, I thought I was to help you come to terms with what happened, but deep down, it was for me too. Her wing tightened and caressed around your body. You lean forward and wrap your arms around her body, pulling her into a tender hug. You can feel her heart racing beneath her soft fur. It had been so long since I'd had someone who spoke to me as an equal, a true equal, not a rival or an enemy. You spoke to me as if I was a common mare asking how your day had been. You nod against her fur, not wanting to interrupt her. She returns the affection with a light nuzzle on your head. I love listening to you. You're not afraid. Even Twilight, as smart as she is, still had an air of reverence about her I could never get past. But you met me as an equal first. We spoke, we laughed. We even bickered as the night dragged on. And you never once skipped a chance to tell me how absurd all of this was to you. The last bit was followed with a weak giggle as her wing gave you another squeeze. As time flowed on, you began to realize who I really was, what I meant to all these ponies. When you asked to join the guard, I was heartbroken. I was worried you saw me as they did. But as time went on, when I passed you in the halls or asked you how your training was progressing, you spoke to me the same as you always have. It was your turn to chuckle. Your laxed attitude when it came to talking to Princess Celestia earned you more than one run around the barracks. You didn't want to make her feel guilty, so you kept that to yourself. So I watched, and I waited, till lonely night after lonely night passed, and I couldn't wait any longer. I had to know if you were ready to invite another into your heart, so I sent you that note. I'm ashamed of myself for being so timid, but I couldn't think of a better way.
You could have asked me.
She shook her head. I wouldn't know if it was your heart or your uniform saying yes. I had to know your heart was open for something more than devotion to the princess you took an oath to serve. That it was just as I felt, just a desire to not be lonely anymore. You see a napkin levitate above you, followed by a very quiet sniffle. Despite her best efforts, a tear or two falls onto the marble below. But as always, her emotions pass as quickly as it arrived. Thank you for listening tonight. It means more than I could have ever expressed with words or even actions. She gives you another squeeze with her wing, and you look up. She's smiling, her eyes moist but bright as always, though you can see a little speck of hope glinting against the light of the stars.
You're welcome, Celestia. I enjoy spending time with you. You make me feel like this place can actually be home. Even now, after I've been here as long as I have been, when I'm with you, that's the only time I don't want to leave.
Her smile brightens, and her wing rubs you back some more. You give her another squeeze. There was more you wanted to say, and you could tell she felt the same. But there would be that time for another day. Right now, there was the entire night ahead of you. I may have taken the liberty of having your duty assignments for tomorrow canceled. It would be unfair of me to invite you for a private audience, only to expect you at your post at sunrise. You nod and laugh a little. She thinks of everything. Luna can handle my duties in the morning. Call it punishment for her little stunt with the eggs. She really thinks of everything.
So, what would you like to do then?
She looks back at the doors. Tell you what, I'll go fetch that cherry pie where you think of something fun to talk about. Anything you'd like, so long as you do one thing. You tilt your head, wondering what it was. Please, don't let it get too quiet.
Alrighty, guys, that was part 2 of Quiet Sunsets. As always, thank you so much for being here. I know last time I said that there would be 2 more, but I don't know what the hell I was thinking. There's probably going to be 2 more after this one, or maybe 3. It ended up being longer than I thought it was. But I really appreciate all the continued comments and likes and supports. It really means a lot to me. We've almost reached 200 subscribers, so that's awesome. As always, guys, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.